Hi guys, this is Tekken57. Welcome back to my video tutorial series. This tutorial is going to be focusing on how to capture meshes from the Creation Studio. That is, if somebody has created a wrestler, or you've created a wrestler that you want to capture and convert into a wrestler mod. This tutorial is going to show you step by step how to do this. I'm going to break this tutorial up into two parts. The first part is going to focus on how to capture the create a wrestler from Creation Studio and how to prepare the mesh which is captured for creation into a custom Y object. And then the second part of the tutorial, I'm going to focus on how to create a custom Y object. I've done tutorials on this in the past, but with new discoveries now, there are much quicker methods in which to create custom Y object files. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that as well. Alright, the first thing you need to do is you need to get a program called Ninja Ripper. Okay, Ninja Ripper is basically a program which allows you to okay, you need to get a program called Ninja Ripper. Alright, the first thing you need to do is you need to download a program called Ninja Ripper. Ninja Ripper is a program which will allow you to grab whatever meshes are currently displayed on the screen from any application. In this instance, Ninja Ripper is a program which will allow you to grab meshes which are displayed on the screen, and it will allow you to import this into either 3D Studio Max or to Neosys, which is a free program as well. An important thing to note here is that my Ninja Ripper suddenly stopped working and I couldn't figure out why. And this is due to the NVIDIA drivers which were installed on my computer. When the NVIDIA drivers did an update, for some reason it blocked Ninja Ripper from grabbing any of the meshes or textures from the game. So I'm running this on my notebook, and the way in which I overcame this is I go into the NVIDIA control panel and I select the program settings specifically to WWE 2K19. Okay, and because I have two graphics cards on my notebook, which is the NVIDIA graphics processor and the integrated graphics processor, which is an Intel card, I'm going to select the integrated graphics processor. Now, the integrated graphics processor is not really meant for running 3D games. It's meant more for working on very basic tasks such as Word and Excel, etc. But because there's a problem with the NVIDIA driver on my notebook which prevents Ninja Ripper from grabbing the meshes, I'm going to select the Intel driver. Now, unfortunately, the only downside from doing this is because this is not a dedicated 3D graphics card, the game is going to run fairly slowly, but we're not really going to do much in the game except for grab the meshes. So we can bear with the slowness for a bit. Alright, so now that I've selected the integrated graphics card to run on my PC, I'm going to start up Ninja Ripper. Okay, you select the exe for your game, which is in the Steam Apps Common WWE 2K19 folder. I select Intrude the Inject, and then I click on Run. Okay, when you click on Run in this way, it will start the game, and once the game starts, okay, I'm just going to get into the game. Okay, alright, once the game starts, you can go into Creations, select Superstar, and you select Edit Custom Superstar. Okay, this will load all of the create a wrestler that you have on your save, either create a wrestlers that you've downloaded or create a wrestlers that you've created on your own. Now I've got a couple here that I've downloaded. So for today's example, I'm going to be converting Peugeot 12's Brian Adams. So I'm going to select Brian Adams and I'm click on Edit. Alright, now this will display the created wrestler. Now we are going to grab the meshes and the textures from this created wrestler. Now I'm just going to go into Ninja Ripper and I'm going to look at the settings. Okay, I have the rip key selected as Control F7, Control F8 and Control F9. Okay, this is to grab the textures, the meshes, and to also force Ninja Ripper to grab everything that's on the screen. Okay, so now that I've verified which buttons I need to press, I'm going to click on, I'm going to select face. This is going to load the created wrestler without any attire parts. And then thereafter, I'm going to press F2. Okay, F2 is going to display the wrestler without any attire. Okay, and it's going to put it in a pose which is going to make it easy for Ninja to grab. I'm going to start and F8, which is going to grab the textures first. Okay, once it's done grabbing the textures, I'm going to click on Control F7, which is going to grab all of the meshes. And then just to be safe, I also click on Control and F9. Okay, so I'm going to go through all of the button presses which were specified in Ninja Ripper. I'm going to click on Control F8, Control. Okay, I'm going to go through all of the button presses which were defined in Ninja Ripper, which is Control and 8, Control and 7, and Control and 9. Okay, this will grab the textures, the meshes, and anything else in the scene. I like to do all three just to make sure that I grab everything that we need. Okay, the reason why I'm doing it, the reason why I'm grabbing the reason why the reason why I'm doing this by selecting the wrestler without any attire is because if the wrestler has an attire, the part out and importing it to 3 wrestler. Okay, now on escape. Textures and meshes. So unfortunately, attire part and use these as regular. And I've hidden F2. Again, where I'm going to click grab all of the textures and right now. All right. If I go into the folder where if I go into the folder that is specified, that Ninja Ripper should store the textures and the meshes, you'll find that there should be a textures folder, which was ripped when we clicked on the Control and 8 button together. You'll find that this will have all of the textures that we've ripped from the game. It'll have textures from just the wrestler without any attire, and it'll also have the attire textures because we've done this separately. You'll notice that it also grabs the renders that you specified when creating the create a wrestler, so you can also use these files to create a nice render for your wrestler mod at a later stage. Okay, there's a couple of different sets of textures. Like you'll notice that there are textures where there are no tattoos or no hair textures applied. Like if you look at this face texture, and then if you scroll a bit down where we grabbed the texture from the attire, you'll notice that now this has the all of the textures from the attire applied to the face and body textures as well. So for instance, this has hair and this has sideburns. If the body had any tattoos, you'll find that the tattoos will appear on the body textures when you grab the textures from the attire meshes. Alright, so those are the textures. Then you'll see that there's a number of different directories which have been created as well. I'm just going to go into the first one. Because I selected because I've ripped the attire, because I've ripped the wrestler, because I've ripped the create a wrestler without any attire first, this is the directory that we want to work with. If you scroll down to the textures, you'll see that it has the textures that are applied without any attire or hair textures to it. Alright, so these are the rip files that we want to work with. The reason for this is because, like I said, if you rip a create a wrestler with attire, you'll find that bits of the mesh is missing or masked out due to the attire meshes covering the body parts. So we want the create a wrestler meshes without any attire applied to it. Alright, you'll see that there's a number of rip files which are in this directory. The rip files are basically Ninja rip files, and you can import these either into 3D Studio Max or into Neosis, which is a free program, whichever your preference is. I'm going to import this into 3D Studio Max because I'm going to work with the mesh from 3D Studio Max, and then thereafter I'm going to create a custom Y object from this. Alright, so you open up 3D Studio Max, alright, and then you run the Ninja Ripper importer script, okay, which comes with Ninja Ripper. Okay, you select group, and then thereafter you select the input directory, which is the directory that we are working with here. Okay, then you need to specify the rip file numbers. So I import all of the rip files which were created. So it starts at rip 0 and it goes all the way down to 348. So I'm going to specify 0 to 348. Okay, another important thing that you need to do here is you need to ensure that the scale is set to 0. Scale is set to 1, so that it preserves the meshes in the same size as the meshes that you're going to try and import over for your custom Y object. Also ensure that your rotate is set to 0. Okay, so these two are very important. This will save you a lot of time later on from having to reposition and to rescale the mesh. Alright, once you are happy with this, I leave all of the other settings the way it is, and then I click on the import button. Okay, I'm just going to skip this because it's going to take a little bit of time to do the import. I've already done the import for you. Okay, if you've done the import correctly, you'll notice that you'll find that there is a wrestler mesh, which is you'll find that your created wrestler meshes have been grabbed into the scene, and the wrestler mesh is in T-pose, and it already has textures applied to it. You'll find that there's a lot of other meshes which have been grabbed, which we don't really need, like you look at this pink background, etc. And you'll also notice that there's a mesh on this side, on the extreme right. I'm just going to go to that. Okay, and you'll see that this is the okay, if you look at the mesh that's on the extreme right of the screen, you'll notice that there is a mesh which looks distorted. This is usually the mesh with the attire applied. So unfortunately, all of the attire meshes get corrupted through Ninja Ripper. So we don't really need to work with that. Okay, so I'm just going to highlight all the meshes that we don't need, and I'm going to delete these from the scene just to make our scene a little bit cleaner and a bit neater to work with. So I'm just going to highlight everything and delete it. I'm going to do the same with all of these. Alright, and then I'm just going to work with the mesh that we have in the center here. Okay, now another thing to note is that because we've clicked on a few different buttons to rip, you'll find that sometimes there are multiple versions of the same mesh on the screen. So I'm just going to highlight this. You'll find that sometimes there's three meshes, which are the head mesh, and we don't need so many. So if you look on the side here, you'll see there's 3 different meshes. I'm just going to hide that, and I'm only going to select one of the meshes. So let's do that. Okay, so we don't need all of these. The same applies to the eye meshes, etc. So I'm not going to import the eye meshes. I'm just going to import the head, and I'm going to import the eye sockets as well. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with the eye meshes. I don't need these. I'm not going to import these. So I'm just going to highlight those, and I'm going to hide that. The eye sockets, I like to actually combine these with the head when I'm importing these. So it's up to you whether you want to import them or not. I'm just going to hide all, and then I'm going to select one of these to open up. And I'm going to open up the head mesh as well. Okay, so we've got one of the head meshes, and we've got one of the eye socket meshes. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with the arms. Just going to hide everything, and then only enable one. Okay, you notice that there's 3 meshes which are selected. I'm just going to hide all, select one. Doesn't really matter which one you select, all 3 are the same. Okay, I'm just going to hide that and then select one as well. Alright, let me just add a little bit of light to the scene so we can see a bit better. Alright, so now we have the head mesh and we have the body meshes that we want to import. Now, before we do anything further, you will notice in the textures folder of Ninja Ripper that the body textures and the arm textures are allocated to individual textures. What I mean is that okay, so if you look at the textures, you'll see that there's a separate texture for the arms and separate textures for the torso. Now, because we want to put this into a okay, if you look at the textures which are ripped from Ninja Ripper, you'll notice that there are individual textures for the arms, for the chest, hands, etc. Okay, because we are now going to convert this into a wrestler mod, I like to take all of the textures and put them into the all color DDS, which is the standard for all wrestler yobj files. So unfortunately, we're going to have to remap the UVs. Okay, so what I've done is I've taken all of the textures which have been ripped, and I've copied and pasted them appropriately onto the all color texture file. I've done it for the color, for the I've done it for the diffuse texture, I've done it for the MR texture, and I've also done it for the normal textures. Okay, I've also done the same thing for the head textures. I've also done the same thing for the head textures, where I've taken the color. I've also done the same thing for the head textures, where I've taken the diffuse texture, the MR texture, and the normal texture, and I've saved these in the appropriate files. Okay, so let's remap the UVs of these files first. If you followed any of my previous tutorials, you'll know that I don't like to import the hands, the legs, or the feet, just to save time. The hands are a bit of a pain to rig, so I don't like to import these at all. So I'm only going to import the head, and I'm going to import the torso and the arms. Okay, so let's remap the UVs of these first. So let's select this. So let's select the torso mesh, and I'm going to click on the modifiers tab, and I'm going to select unwrap UV. Okay, I'm going to click on open UV editor. I'm going to select which texture I want to view when remapping the UVs, and I'm going to assign this accordingly. Okay, so we need to remap the UVs of the torso and the arm objects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new texture. I'm going to create a new material in 3D Studio Max using the all color texture which I've created, and I'm going to assign these to the appropriate meshes. Okay, so let's select the diffuse texture. Okay, I'm going to use the all color.png. Let's give it the normal while we're here as well. I'm just going to reduce the spec so it doesn't shine too much, and let's assign it appropriately. Okay, let's just do the head as well while we're here. Alright, so now that we have the texture applied, I'm going to remap the UVs. So select the modifiers and select unwrap UVW. Okay, open UV editor. and then thereafter select the texture that you want to use to view the text, and then thereafter select the texture that you want to use to remap the UVs to. Okay, so I'm going to select everything for the chest object, and I'm just going to scale this to fit the chest area that we have here. Okay, I think that looks about right. Let's just zoom in a bit more. Okay, that looks good to me. Okay, and then thereafter we're going to do the same for the left and the right arm. Alright, cool. So we have the textures that have been remapped now to the all color texture. Alright, at this point in time we are ready to start creating custom object files from this. But before we do that, I just like to make copies of all of the meshes so that we, in case I make a mistake at a later stage, I can easily revert back to one of the earlier meshes which I had. Let's just hide these as well, so we don't need those. Okay, so let's just make copies of these so that in case I make a mistake at a later stage, I have copies of the meshes which I can revert to. So I'm just going to click on Edit Clone, and I'm going to click on Copy. Okay, so this is just going to make copies, duplicates of the meshes. I'm going to hide these for now. I don't really need these. It's just for backup. Alright, remember to save your work as you're going along as well. Alright, now you can either import all of these meshes individually into 3D Studio Max, or you can combine some of the meshes. Okay, I like to combine the arms and the torso together, simply because it saves me time from having to rig all of these individually, and then sometimes you have issues with the arms not connecting to the torso when it's rigged, etc. So if you combine these into one mesh, it saves you a lot of time. So I'm just going to select these three meshes together. Okay, I'm going to go into the last tab, the Utilities tab. I'm going to click on Collapse, and I'm going to click on Collapse Selected. I'm going to leave everything the way it is default, which is output type mesh, collapse to single object, and I'm going to click on Collapse. Okay, so now all of these are in a single mesh. So I hide that, you can see it's all together. Right. Now because these are individual meshes, you'll find that you can still see some of the seams where the meshes meet. So to get rid of that, I'm going to just apply a Vertex Weld. Okay, and I'm going to specify a threshold of 0.01, which is the lowest that 3D Studio Max will allow you to do. 0.01. Alright. Now also sometimes you'll find that when Ninja Ripper rips the mesh, there are a couple of deformed triangles which appear on the inside, which kind of mess up the way the mesh is going to be weighted. Sometimes when Ninja Ripper rips the meshes, you'll find that it has some deformed triangles which are on the inside of the mesh which you can't see, which will later on mess up the rigging of the mesh. So in order to get around this, I like to also give this a mesh smooth. Mesh smooth is normally used to increase the detail on the mesh, but in this case I'm just going to set this as quad output, and I'm going to set this to 0.1. So in this case, it's just going to retriangulate all of the meshes so that we get rid of any weird deformed faces or triangles in the mesh. Okay. I like to select quad output so that it doesn't mess up any of the joints. If you select classic, sometimes you'll find that the places where the meshes intersect, sometimes it looks a little bit weird. Alright, and then thereafter I like to also give it a Pro Optimize. Pro Optimize will also retriangulate. Okay, you click on the calculate button. So importantly, you need to select keep textures so it doesn't lose the UV mapping. I'm going to select this to 99.5. We don't actually need to reduce the amount of triangles, but it's just going to retriangulate this for us, so we don't have any problems when we're rigging later on. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing for the head mesh, even though it's not really required. I'm just going to give it a mesh smooth. I'm going to select quad output, and I'm going to make it 0.1 as well, and then thereafter Pro Optimizer. Okay, I'm going to make sure I select keep textures, and then once again I'm going to set the value to 99.5. Alright, so now we have two sets of meshes that we want. Alright, so now I'm going to prepare the head mesh. For the head mesh, I like to take the eye socket mesh as well, which is normally object 16 in a wrestler mesh. You don't have to do it, but I like to combine these two so that it makes it a bit easier later on when you're trying to align the eyes and trying to create another object 16 for the animations. Anyways, the choice is yours. So I'm going to select both these meshes. I'm going to do the same as before. I'm going to go collapse selected. Okay, so this is now going to make it into one mesh. Okay, and now because we've combined two meshes, I want to do the same thing whereby I apply a Vertex Weld so that we join these two. We'll make it 0.01, and then thereafter I'm going to give it a mesh smooth. We'll set it to quad output, and 0.1 should be fine for me there, and then thereafter I'm going to give it a Pro Optimize. Okay, select keep textures, and then once again specify 99.5. Alright, so now we have the head texture and we have the torso and the arms ready to be prepared for a custom yobj file. Alright, so I'm going to stop this tutorial at this point in time, and I'm going to now move on to part 2, which is creating a custom yobj file from the meshes that we've just ripped from the game. Remember to save your work as you proceed. There are many times when 3D Studio Max crashes as I'm working and I end up losing a lot of work, so just remember to save as you go along. Alright, so join me for part 2. Hi, this is Tekken57. Welcome back to my video tutorial series. Okay, this tutorial is going to be focusing on how to create custom meshes. This tutorial is going to be focusing on how to create custom yobj files. Now, I've done 4 tutorials before this on how to create custom yobj files. However, we've discovered a lot since I've done these tutorials. So the process is a lot simpler and a lot easier with the new discovery that we've made. So I've decided to just re-record a custom yobj tutorial to show you guys a quicker method of doing your own custom wrestler mods. Okay, so for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm using a mesh which I've grabbed from Creation Studio. This is a created wrestler created by Tekken57. However, the principles that I'm talking about in this tutorial apply to any mesh that you could have grabbed from any game. Okay, so for this tutorial I have a head mesh which I've also combined with the eye socket meshes, which is normally object 16. And then I have the torso and the arm meshes, which I've ripped from Creation Studio. I've chosen to combine these into a single mesh rather than importing all of these individually. The choice is yours. I prefer to do it in this way because it's much quicker, and if I'm rigging the model at a later stage, it's much easier to rig one object than it is to rig 3 separate objects. And also it saves you time from having to re-weight certain parts because the arms don't connect to the torso correctly, etc. So it's just a quicker way of doing it. However, the choice is yours. Okay, so I have the meshes prepared already. I've combined the meshes using the collapse modifier, and I've also applied a Vertex Weld to these of 0.01, just so that the meshes are joined and any overlapping vertices are combined. Then I've given a mesh smooth of 0.1 and a Pro Optimizer modifier as well of 99.5. This is not always necessary, but I've chosen to do this because it retriangulates the meshes so that if there's any deformed faces or triangles which you cannot see, which will later on mess up the weighting of the file, the Pro Optimizer and Mesh Smooth will take care of these. Alright, so now that we have the meshes prepared, I'm just going to select both the meshes and I'm going to give it a normal modifier. The normal modifier is required so that when we're exporting it to NUF, the meshes will appear in game, because the normals in the game is flipped as compared to any other engine. Alright, so I'm going to select the head object first, and I'm going to click on File, Export, Export selected, and I'm going to select where I want to put this into. Okay, so I've got a folder in my work directory which is called Meshes. So I'm going to export into this directory. We need to export into the NUF format. I'm going to call this object 0 because this is the head object. Okay, we need to select Dark Age of Camelot. We need to ensure that we have generated strips selected, and we have also selected the normals. Okay, thereafter I'm going to click on Export. Alright, and then it's created a NUF file for us. Now I'm going to do the same with the torso object. So I'm going to click on Export Selected. I'm going to call this object 1. I'm going to leave it as NUF, and then once again ensure Dark Age of Camelot is selected. Generate strips and normals must be selected as well. Alright, so we have object 0 and we have object 1. Now I like to rig the custom meshes to a wrestler which has more or less some of the attire parts that I require when I'm creating the wrestler mod. So because I'm creating Bryan Adams, who uses a singlet in this instance, I'm gonna rig this to Sting, and I'm choosing to use the Wolfpack version of Sting because he also has a beard, which I can also use for Bryan Adams at a later stage. However, you can rig this to any mesh that you want to. Alright, so I'm going to open up Wolfpack Sting in X-Ray using the Control N option. Alright, I'm just going to look at the objects which are listed and see which ones I need and which ones I don't need. Alright, so 24 and 25 you definitely don't need. These are low res versions of the eyes and the head. Okay, I don't need the gloves. The beard I want. And also I don't want the boots because Bryan Adams actually uses different boots. So I'm going to take boots from another wrestler and put this into this file. I want the singlet and everything else we need as well. Okay, so I'm going to click on Extract All, and I'm going to put this into the meshes directory. Alright, so we don't need object 0, object 1, object 2 and object 3 because these are now in our custom NIF files. Alright, so let's delete those. So object 0, 1, 2 and 3. We're going to delete those. Okay, and then let's delete all of the other ones that we don't need as well. So 24 and 25 definitely we don't want. 23 and 22 we don't need. 20, 19 and 18 are all boots, so let's take those out. 20, 19 and 18. Make sure you delete the object info and the header info for the files as well. Alright, so that has everything that we need. So I think we are now ready to, I've missed the header info for object 1, so let's delete that. Alright, so now that we have everything that we need, let's create our custom yobj file. So in X-Ray you can click on File, New yobj File, or you can click on Control P. Okay, we're going to select a yobj file which we're going to use as a base. So because we are rigging to Wolfpack Sting, I'm going to select Wolfpack Sting's yobj file. Okay, thereafter we're going to select all of the meshes that we need. So I'm going to go into the meshes directory, I'm going to select everything that is there. Alright, now you're given options to specify which shaders and the weight counts, etc. for the custom meshes that you've done. So firstly, the first mesh that we have, object 0, is the head. So we must give it a name of m_head. The second one is m_body, which is fine. For the head, we want it to have facial animations. So the number of facial animations which is contained in this file, if you look at the mount bag and the other face objects, you'll see that there's 111 facial animations. So I'm going to set this to 111. Okay, then thereafter we need to specify which shaders we want to use for these objects. And because this is the head mesh, we want to select skin, and we want to ensure that we're selecting the head mesh. Okay, we want to ensure that we're selecting skin, and we're also ensuring that it is the shader for the head. The second one is skin, and we want to ensure that it is for the body. Okay, so the weight count we leave it the same the way it is, and then we click on create yobj. Okay, I'm going to give it a name of 0000, and that's going to create our object for us. Okay, if I open this file, alright, so we can see that our custom mesh has been imported. Alright, and it has all of the other meshes that we need. Now, before we can import this into the game, you need to ensure that this custom mesh actually references the correct textures, so that it will load the head textures and the body textures appropriately. Now, in order to do this, you need to set these values in the shader parameters. Okay, so if you right click and you click on edit shader parameters, you'll notice that there are values for diffuse, normal map, etc. Okay, you can go and set these manually by clicking on edit materials and then finding the correct texture values. So for instance, all colors 7 and head is 1, etc. Okay, a quicker way to do this is to just open up the Sting yobj file, and we can export the shader parameter values from here directly. So let's click on edit shader parameters. I'm going to click on export values. Okay, that's for the head. I'm going to do the same thing for the body. Let's just call the shader parameters body so we don't get confused. Alright, let's open up the custom mesh again. Hereditary parameters. I'm going to click on import values, and I'm going to select the values that we've just selected, and I'm select the values that we've just exported. Save changes. Same for the body. Alright, cool. So we now have the custom yobj file. So we need to rig this to the Sting Wolfpack mesh. So we need to rig this to the bones in the Sting Wolfpack file for it to run correctly in game. That's going to be the next step. But before we do that, I actually need boots as well for this wrestler. So the wrestler file that has the boots that I want is actually the Batista 2K19 yobj file. So there's two ways in which you can do this. You can either take the boots from Batista and you can create a custom yobj file like we've done just now, whereby we import everything into the Sting Wolfpack file, but that means you need to rig the boots to the Sting Wolfpack skeleton in order for it to move correctly. The second option is you can just create a second yobj file which you can put into the game. Now the easiest way to do this is to just click on extract for the boots. Okay, and now I'm going to create a custom yobj file using only the boots, but I'm going to rig this to Batista's. So now I'm just going to create a custom yobj file containing only the boots, and I'm going to use Batista's yobj file as the base. In this way I don't need to re-rig the file, and it's a quicker way of doing it. This will also create a much smaller file which you use as a secondary yobj. So this means that you can import multiple yobj files from different wrestlers to create the tire that you want without having to worry about the file size. So I'll show you this in a minute. So once again, Control P. Okay, I'm going to select Batista's yobj as the file that we want to use as a base. I'm going to click on Select Meshes, and I'm going to select Object 22, which is the boots, and I'm going to click on Create yobj. Now I'm going to name this 5607 because this is going to be a secondary yobj. You can use 5607 right up to 5619, whatever name you choose, or 001A, 001B, etc. Okay, 5607. I click on Create. Alright, and now if I click on Open, you'll notice that this file is only 480 kilobits, whereas if you look at the Batista file, that was 20 megs. Okay, and now this is now just the boots. Okay, and because we've used Batista's yobj as a base, we don't need to re-read this as well. Okay, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to put this into another folder which I've called Extracted, which is going to contain all of the files that we need. Okay, and then thereafter I'm going to take our custom mesh as well. Just remember we need to rig this file as well. I'm just going to place this here to show you what happens if we don't rig it. Alright, so let's do that. Remember to set your graphic settings if you've changed it to the integrated card to your high performance graphics card so that the game runs at a high speed. Okay, then you can start the game normally using Steam. You don't need to use Ninja Ripper to start it. Okay, so while that's running, let's start preparing the files that we need. Okay, so while that's running, let's prepare the Pac file for the wrestler that we need. Okay, so firstly, let's get all of the textures that we need into the directory that we want. So I've extracted all of Sting Wolfpack's files here. I've taken Batista's boot textures and I've copied all of the MR and the the head textures which I've created as well. And I'm just going to create a new texture archive out of this. So I'm going to select Control N in X-Packer, and I'm going to select all of the textures that we have in the in this folder, and I'm going to click on Create Texture Archive. We'll call this 000A. Alright, we have the texture archive created. I'm just going to take this and put this into this directory. I'm just going to create a new Pac file from this. Now before we do this, there's a few files that you need to delete from this directory. If you don't delete this, you'll find that the game crashes because we've removed the torso and the arm objects from the original Y object file. So Lunch Reborn has actually figured out that there are certain controller files in here that if you remove, you can add whichever custom Y object files you want without having to preserve the torso and the arm objects. So the files that we need to delete is the 00CD, the E1 file can go. E6 is the file that usually controls the shape of the beard. Because we have created a custom head object, you'll find that this is now going to create issues because the beard can't map to the custom head that we've created. All of the F files need to go because these are for Creation Studio. Any other weird files that you find here, like 0011, the 100 file can go. 2580 is fine because that's for the hair animation, and 2715 is a hair file, so we need that. 5607 is the Batista boots that we've added. So let's delete these files. Okay, I like to leave the CE as a zlib file because when I'm creating masking later on, I don't need to go and recreate the pack. I can just compress and inject into this. Alright, now with all the files that we need in a single directory, let's click on let's go into X-Packer, click on select. Let's go into X-Packer and click on Ctrl+P, select files, and then thereafter let's select all of the files. Okay, I'm going to click on Create Pac File. I'm just going to call this file Brian. Doesn't matter what you call it actually. Alright, and then thereafter I'm going to create a Pac file to correspond with the slot number that I'm injecting into. So I've already done this. I'm using slot 460, so therefore I'm calling this 46002, which 02 meaning that this is the in-ring Pac file. So let's do that. Let's open this file using Ctrl+Q and ensure that the name is correct on the inside as well, so that your package file has the correct slot assigned to it. So in this case 46002. Click on inject, and I'm going to select the package file that we created earlier, which is brian.pac. Alright, cool. So the pack file has been prepared, and we can copy this into the directory while we are working on the rigging, etc. Alright, so now that this the pack file has been prepared, before I forget, let's inject the custom head textures that we've created. And the all color textures as well. The MR and the normals are in the the MR and the normals are in the 000A file, so we don't need to worry about that. Alright, so now let's work on the rigging. So let's open up the mesh that we created. Okay, I'm going to export object 0 and object 1. Okay, and now we need to rig these meshes to the Sting Wolfpack skeleton. Alright, so let's get into the directory so I can find these files easily. Okay, now you need to import the Sting Wolfpack model into 3D Studio Max. The file you need to use for importing this is the script file that you need to use to import this is the ww2k18 PC exclusive file, the one that I've created, which will import the model with the correct weights and the correct orientation. Okay, I've already done this. It takes a little bit of time to import, so I've just done this already to save some time. I'm just going to use a batch importer to import these. You can import these individually or use a batch importer if you want. Alright, I'm just going to select the files that we want to import using the batch importer, and I'm going to click on import all. Alright, so now we've imported the files. We need to rig this to the skeleton. Now the easiest way in which to do this is to use the skin wrap modifier. So I'm going to select object 1. So I'm going to select object 0. I'm going to click on the modifiers tab, and I'm going to select skin wrap. Alright, ensure that vertex deformation is selected. Set your fallout value as low as you can go, which is 0.01, and ensure that weight all points is selected. Alright, thereafter I'm going to select which meshes we want to copy the skin from. So I like to add the meshes to which this mesh is attached to. So in this case the head is attached to the head, the torso and the arms. So let's select those. So let's go head, torso and both arms. Right, with all of the meshes that with all the meshes selected, we are now ready to create a skin for this. So we're going to click on convert to skin. Okay, with the skin modifier selected, we also need to specify the number of bones which will affect the skin. So this needs to match the weight count that we specified for the mesh. Because we specified a weight count of 7, we need to specify 7 as the bone effect limit. I'm going to click on scripting, run script, and you need to run my bone weight script file, which is export bone weights to file. Okay, I'm just going to put this in my work directory. So let's put this here. I'm going to call this object 0.txt. Alright, and now we need to do the same thing for the torso object. So let's select the skin wrap modifier. Okay, the settings should still be the same. Fall off at 0.01 and weight all points selected. I'm going to click on add. Once again, whichever meshes this mesh touches, we will need to select. So firstly, let me just hide these glove objects. We don't need these. I'm going to need to select the arm object. So let's just get rid of those glove objects. Alright, so let's go back into skin wrap. Okay, we click on add. Once again, whichever meshes are touching this. So the head, torso, left arm and right arm, and also the hand objects, because the wrist connects to the hand as well. 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Alright, so we have all of the meshes selected. We're going to click on Convert to Skin. Okay, and this is now going to convert it into a skin modifier. Once again, bone effect limit should be set to 7. And we're going to click on Run Script, Export Bone Weights to File. And this is going to be called and this file will be called object1.txt. I'm going to click on Save. Alright, so now the weights have been imported. Alright, so now we have rigged the custom meshes to the skeleton and the weights have been exported. Alright, so now that we've created the weight files, we are ready to import these back into the mesh. But I'm just going to show you what happens if we don't actually import the weights. You'll find that the meshes that we've imported will be in T-pose and won't actually move with the rest of the skeleton. So let's see what that looks like. Alright, so you can see the arms and the torso and the head are not really moving with the rest of the skeleton. So let's get out of that. And now let's go and import the weights into this file. So let's click on Import Weights. And let's click on Inject and inject that custom object file again back into our Pac file. Alright, and now let's do the and now let's copy this back to our game directory. Alright, if you look at the mesh now in game, you'll see that the mesh is moving correctly with the rest of the skeleton. You find that the arms and the torso and the head, etc., are moving without any issues. Alright, so that means our custom mesh has been imported correctly. Now obviously you'll need to scale the attire to fit this mesh. You'll need to connect the wrist to the arms, etc. And you may also need to do the masking, and you will need to position the bones, the eye objects, etc. So that's fairly simple to do. I'm not really going to cover that in the tutorial. If you're not sure how to fix the eye bones and that sort of thing, go into 3D Studio Max, click on scripting and click on run script, and then you use my script, which is import WWE Tekken no weights, which will import the model into 3D Studio Max, and then thereafter you can go and position each of the bones, and then the bones can be exported into a collada file, which can thereafter be imported back into the model. Alright, so once you've imported the bones, okay, we'll get back to the bones shortly. Okay, so now your wrestler boy object has been created, it's been rigged, it has the correct textures. You need to now create facial animations for this model. So the way in which I like to do this is I like to import this into Modbox. Alright, and then once the mesh is imported into Modbox, I like to go into the Sculpt Layers tab and click on New Layer, and then create animations for each of the corresponding animations. So for instance, eye closed, mouth open, etc. So the way in which you determine which animations to create is to open the original yobj file, which you use as a base. In this case, Wolfpack Sting. Right click, load animations 2K18 upwards. Okay, and then thereafter you look for the corresponding animations that you want to create. Okay, I don't create all of the animations which are contained in this file. It would take much too long to do that. So the animations that I like to create are the ones whereby the eyelids are closed. So if I can find one of those. Okay, so the one where the bottom eyelid is closed, I normally like to create for both sides, and then also where the top eyelid is closed for both sides. Then for me the most important one is animation 45, which is the mouth open. I think with Sting it's actually a different number, so let's just check. Animation 47 in this case, mouth open. And then thereafter I like to create all of the frowning textures, like the, what numbers is it here? Okay, so in this case 55, 56, 57 where smiling, and then 58 where he's got a much bigger smile. So the one way is like a bit of a sad expression where the mouth is in, and the two smiling animations for both sides. So all in all I create about maybe 14 or 15 animations, and then thereafter I inject this into the custom yobj file. So I go into detail as to how to create facial animations in one of my other tutorials. So the process is still pretty much the same. So you can go and watch that tutorial if you need more information on how that works. Alright, so let's just look at the bones quickly before I end this tutorial. So if you look at the placement of the eye bones, okay, in this case both the eye bones seem to be positioned quite nicely, so it's within the eyes. Let's just look at where the tongue bones are positioned. Okay, the tongue bones look alright also, but I think let me just move this a little bit back just to demonstrate. Alright, and okay, so I'm going to select all of the bones that I need to import back into this model. In this case, tongue bones. I'm going to select the jaw and the eyes as well, so let's select all of those. File, export. Let's put this into our work directory. I'm just call this bones, and I'm going to select collada. Alright, and I'm going to click on Ctrl+B in X-Ray. We'll select our mesh. And then thereafter I'm going to start importing all of the bones that we need. So everything is contained in the one collada file, so I'm just going to select bones. Alright, cool. So the bones have been positioned, and you just need to create animations and position the eye and the mouth meshes properly, and you are pretty much done with creating a yobj file. So let's just see what that looks like. Alright, so now that the bones have been positioned correctly, you find that the eyes and the mouth, etc., all move fine. Alright, so alright, so thank you for watching this tutorial. I hope it's been helpful for you, and thank you for watching this tutorial. I hope it's been helpful to you. And this newer method of creating custom yobj files will speed up your process of creating wrestler mods. If you have any further questions, you're welcome to post it in the comments below, and I'll try as fast as possible to answer them as best as I can. Until next time, happy modding and take care.